We swing it down to Austin, and joining us with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, our good friend Chuck DeVore. Chuck, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on your show.
Absolutely. Appreciate you coming on today. Well, we finally had a little bit of movement, a lot of movement yesterday on the great tax cut debate that the leaders have been having in Austin. We finally have an agreement, it seems.
Yeah, it seems so. It looks like we're on the verge of having the biggest tax cut in Texas in about 10 years, about $3.8 billion. We've got an increase in the homestead exemption for homeowners of about $10,000, which should save the average property owner about $120 a year. And then we've got a cut in the franchise tax, the business margin tax of about 25%. So about $3.8 billion total, a little less than the $4.9 billion the House was proposing, or the $4.4 billion the Senate was proposing. So the compromise resulted in a little less of a tax break to the people of Texas, but nevertheless, still the biggest tax cut in about 10 years heading to Governor Abbott's desk.
Well, when you look at the overall tax cut, and it was lower than what was proposed by both the House and the Senate originally, why is it lower? What did they cut out that we kind of need to know about and might be a little bit disappointing?
Well, I think the big cut was in the property tax cut wasn't quite as big as anticipated. I think there's been some concern, and I think the concern is well placed, that because there is no such thing as a state property tax, if the state puts rules on to basically prevent local governments from getting more property taxes, they got to send money down to the local governments to make them whole. And so when you cut property taxes, you're actually cutting a check from the state to the local governments to make up the difference. And then, of course, the challenge is those local governments can simply raise their overall taxes, property taxes, and wipe out any sort of gain at the local level. Now, to prevent that, there was a complementary bill by Senator Betancourt out of the Houston area that makes it a little tougher for local government to raise property taxes, and that's a very important companion to this tax cut bill, and that looks like that's going through as well.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation. What do you think this means for lawmakers, Republicans, conservatives going forward as far as when they talk to citizens out there about how, hey, we cut taxes, we're for smaller government? How does this kind of further their argument moving forward?
Well, I think it does a couple of things. First of all, it follows through on campaign promises that many of them made. They actually did cut the taxes, and you see that from Governor Abbott on down, a very common campaign promise, and they followed through on it and made it happen. Number two, in the future, when you have lower taxes that allow more job growth and a more vibrant economy, more people moving to Texas and starting businesses, it kind of proves the point that smaller government is good for the economy, good for jobs. It also, to the extent that that stronger economy doesn't generate higher tax revenue, which will probably happen anyway, but to the extent that you can kind of reduce or slow the growth of revenue to government, what's going to happen then as a natural result is government growth will slow a little bit. And if we can keep government growth from going out of control, then we have a government we can afford. There'll be less regulations and less pressure in the future to raise taxes.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore. Chuck, now that there's an agreement, we can expect in the few days that we have left other bills to maybe start moving down in Austin. What are some of those bills that you guys are taking a look at and that maybe people out here need to know about?
Well, one that we were particularly interested in was Senate Bill 1902. This is a bill that Senator Perry has been involved in. It's a bill regarding non-disclosure of certain low-level offenses like misdemeanors, where if someone committed basically a one-time indiscretion in their youth, they've avoided getting rearrested or reconvicted for several years, that when they go to apply for a job and the question on the job form, have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime, this would allow people in certain professions, non-banking, non-teaching, right, to be able to say, no, I don't have this on my record because it's non-disclosable. Now, law enforcement, the judiciary, they would still know about the crime. It's just not releasable to the public. And we're not talking about sexual crimes or violent crimes or felonies like that. We're talking about misdemeanor offenses and basically one shot. So what we're trying to do is give people another chance. We're trying to allow people to have better jobs, be employable, support their families. Because once you've done your time and paid your debt to society, you should be able to move on.
Is this something that's retroactive?
Well, sure. If you've maintained the conditions, in other words, you haven't gone back and reoffended,
right.
and you've kept your record clean, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I had someone who emailed about that earlier this morning, whether or not this was something that starts now going forward, or if something happened to somebody in their past, and now this bill maybe gets passed, if that would affect them as well.
This is what that is designed to affect, and we anticipate that there will be many Texans that will be able to get promoted or get better employment because of this law, and we're pretty confident the governor will sign it. It's had enjoyed bipartisan support, and as I mentioned, Republican Senator Perry up in your neck of the woods was one of the main authors of this measure.
What are we seeing as far as any education reforms, anything that's moving there?
There hasn't been a lot in education reform. It's been somewhat disappointing to see the forces of the status quo continuing to prevent meaningful education reform. We're seeing a little bit of movement on an effort to rate schools from A to F so that parents can perhaps have a better understanding of how well their neighborhood school is doing. Perhaps that'll be one of the steps on the path to more education freedom. People know that they have schools that aren't performing adequately that their children would have to go to. Perhaps they'll get a little more engaged and demand higher quality schools, get a little more competition going.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation. I know transportation was also a key area that you guys were looking at. Where are we there?
Well, transportation seems to be a mixed bag right now. Some of the proposals to assign more money to transportation, basically dedicate funds, wall them off, and have them going to transportation. Some of those seem to be foundering in the legislature. There seems to be perhaps a lack of momentum on some of these bills that would have potentially increased funding another $2 to $3, $4 billion. And it remains to be seen whether those are going to get to the governor's desk in time. Now, that's one of those high priority items that if we don't get something at the governor's desk, you may see a special session called because of the governor's strong desire to get that legislation to his desk. Another thing that's been somewhat frustrating for us is the ongoing effort to put more restrictions on the use of design-build contracting by TxDOT. This is a contracting method that, according to several state and federal studies, can save up to 30% of the value of the contract to the taxpayer and get things done more quickly, get them built more rapidly. But you have a lot of contractors out there that benefit from the status quo, and they have powerful allies in the legislature that want to continue the restrictions. So that means our roads will just cost a little bit more, and they'll take a little bit longer to get done as long as we have these restrictions in place.
Visiting with Chuck DeVore, Texas Public Policy Foundation. You can visit them online, texaspolicy.com. Chuck, time is winding down in Austin. We'll visit with you again next week to see where we are on everything.
Yeah, we ought to do a session wrap-up, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see if we have a special session.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll know by then.
Yeah, exactly. Chuck, appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Check out Texas Public Policy Foundation online, texaspolicy.com. A lot of great information covering a lot of areas there on their website.